Hello? Hello? Please, I know you can hear us. We are trapped here in the spaces between worlds. It is a wonderful yet terrifying place, and only our voices escape. You can help us. You can let us in before we go mad.
Stick in the Mud by Curtiss Christensen. I sat at the table in the cafeteria of the correctional facility, slowly spooning the substandard slop into my unwilling gullet. I sat alone as usual, finding the company here to be even more substandard than the food. I didn't belong among these rapists, murderers, thieves, and addicts. Most knew to give me a wide berth. I may not belong, but I had definitely adapted to the harsh savagery of the prison system. During my 10 years at this particular facility, I had hospitalized more than my share of inmates that made the mistake of bothering me. I had certainly taken my licks, but every scar on my body had been purchased by my victim with a broken bone, a concussion, or internal bleeding. This is why it surprised me when someone approached. The pasty twig boy sat down across from me. His orange jumpsuit looked to be 2 sizes too big and hung loosely over his frame. The only reason that I didn't put a dent in his head with my food tray is that he reminded me of my brother. "Hi," he said. "I'm new here." "Obviously," I growled back. He didn't seem to get the hint and continued. "The name's Scott Picardo. Got caught jacking a Lambo. Would have gotten away with it too if the damn thing didn't have one of those newfangled security devices. Soon as the pigs got within range, they shut off the engine remotely. Didn't like it when I ran either." "I don't care," I said and glared at him, but the sight of his face further cemented my illogical tolerance of his presence. He was nearly the spitting image of my younger brother. Freckled cheeks and nose, piercing green eyes that were slightly offset, narrow jaw that tapered to a sharp point of his chin, and a ginger-colored mess of macaroni on top his head. It was stupid, but I missed my little siblings so much that the shell I had developed here in the clink started to crack just a bit. "Well then," he said, "if you don't want to hear about me, how about we change the subject? What's your name?" "None of your business," I replied. Fine. So what are you in for?" he asked. Of course he would ask that cliched question, like this were some kind of prison movie. This man either had a death wish, or he was missing a few gears in the attic. "Murder," I responded after a pause. "Ho, the big one. Who'd you kill?" "Nobody." "That right. If that's how it works, I suppose I didn't steal that car, or nick an old lady's handbag. Come on, man, give me some details. How'd it really go down? Just between you and me convicts. Hell, we're practically brothers now." I slammed my fist on the table, and several of the nearby conversations deadened in anticipatory silence. Excited eyes peered toward us, eager to feast on the vision of brutal pending violence. Everyone assumed I was about to make this kid swallow his own teeth. "I'm not a killer. I'm a survivor," I stated. "What's that supposed to mean? Self-defense?" I sighed and pushed my meal aside. "Fine. I'll tell you. When I'm done, you'll think I belong on the funny farm rather than the penitentiary. time's short, so shut up and listen. I was only 15 at the time, the oldest of my friend group. We were a motley gang of boys ranging from the age of 10 all the way to me. But age difference didn't matter much when the pool of kids in our tiny backwater town only numbered in the double digits. There were 6 of us, including me. JJ, Rutger, Ben, Casey, and my brother Angus. We were arguing one Saturday about what to do when Rutger got the idea to build a fort. Of course, we all knew the best place for fort building was the ranch. The rancher had been clearing trees from the edge of his property, so there was plenty of material, but it wasn't so clear that we could easily be spotted. I was against this trespassing, but the other boys goaded and convinced me to go along with it, so we hopped on our bikes and pedaled our way to the outskirts of the rancher's land. We stashed our bicycles in a bush nearby and walked the rest of the way. The ground was muddy from the spring melt, but there were still a few piles of dirty snow scattered in the shade. When we got to the barbed wire fence, I stepped on the bottom wire and grabbed the middle one to pull it up. My buddies ducked through and I followed with the help of Angus. We wandered for a bit before finding the mother lode. The rancher had gathered the wood of about 7 trees into a single burn pile. We got to work. Ben had these grand designs for a palace made of sticks, but we only managed to put together a ramshackle lean-to before everyone got bored. Casey suggested that we go exploring. Again, I was hesitant to continue our foray into ranchland, and again they decided to go against my wishes. I gave in and went with. We meandered around the fields and hills until we accidentally walked into a grove of trees that were covered in spikes. The ground was littered with the little natural caltrops, and they pricked at our feet through the rubber of our boots. We had to find a different way out than the one we had come in, and I carried the youngest, JJ, through the thorny patch. Upon exiting the grove, we stumbled upon a large pond that was fringed with a thin layer of thawing ice. Everyone forgot about the pain in their feet and started to get excited about the pond. It was Angus who came up with the game. "Don't you think that's a bit dangerous?" I said as the others started out across the ice, trying to see who could get furthest before it cracked. "Geez, why are you always such a stick in the mud?" said Casey. "More like he's got a stick up his ass. If we listened to you, we'd never have any fun," said Rutger. "It's not even that deep under the ice. Come on, it's great," chimed in Angus. I stubbornly refused to participate in their game. Instead, I entertained myself by trying to catch frogs. Strangely enough, despite the relative cold, heaps of them sluggishly hopped around the pond. Even stranger, they seemed to be moving away from the water. I eyed a big bullfrog that was sitting on the bank. I snuck in as carefully as I could and pounced. It squirmed its way out of my grip and hopped down onto a patch of waterlogged mud. I expected it to keep jumping, but the big brown frog seemed to get sucked under the bog. It struck me as odd, but I kept on the hunt. After little success, I looked at my friends to see who was winning their dumb game. No one had fallen through the ice yet, but I could already tell the older, heavier boys were struggling. JJ was too scared to move very fast, but Ben and Angus were neck and neck. Ben pulled ahead and I could hear the audible crack of ice. Ben's foot plunged through and sank down to his knee. "Damn it," he exclaimed. "I was sure I was going to win." He tried to pull his leg free, but only managed to push his other through the ice and into the muck. Guys, I think I'm stuck." "Gah, why is it so warm?" he asked. Angus carefully made his way over and held out a hand. Ben grabbed it and pulled. The crispy layer of ice under Angus gave to and he sank into the mud. "Oh crap, I can't get out either," whined Angus as he shifted side to side. "Just focus on one leg and don't worry if the other one sinks further. When you get on top, roll across to the bank. Mom's going to have a fit when you come home covered in mud," I said with a snarky, "I told you so" tone. Ben shrieked. "Something's touching me! It's grabbing my leg!" he yelled. "What are you talking about? Shut it, or the rancher will hear," said Casey. JJ, already scared, ran for the edge of the pond. Then Ben shot under. We heard the sound of his gagging scream as the muck hit his face and he sank out of sight. "Angus! Grab him! Get him out of there!" I shouted. Angus plunged his arms into the mud and searched around. "He's gone. I can't find him," said Angus in a panic. I was starting to grow anxious too. Casey and Rutger made for the bank like bats out of hell. Casey got there, but Rutger punched through the ice and his ankles were glued to the mud. JJ was crying and Casey was blubbering. "What do we do? What do we do?" "Angus, keep looking for Ben. He has to be there. Dig as far as you can. Get him out or he'll drown. Meanwhile, we've got to form a chain to pull them up," I said. Casey nodded confidently, but I could already see the tears forming in the corners of his eyes. "JJ, I know you're scared, but you've got to man up. I need you to get out there to Angus and Ben. You grab Angus's hand as hard as you can, and I promise I'll pull you out. We need to work together, or they'll be stuck out there. You'll probably sink in too, but I need you to not panic. Trust me on this," I said to the young boy. He wiped away his tears and started to walk across the ice. "I trust you," he said. Casey went to Rutger and grabbed him. Rutger was still trying to free himself, and I saw the white on his now bootless sock before his foot plunged back down. "Rutger, stop struggling. You're only making it worse. I'll get you out of there, but you have to grab onto JJ so we can pull all of them out," I said. JJ obediently positioned himself between Rutger and Angus. He grabbed Rutger's wrist and crashed through into the muck below. I grabbed Casey's hand and started to pull. "Wait!" shrieked Angus. "I don't have Ben yet." It was at this moment that there was a disturbance on the surface of the pond. Gentle ripples formed, and at their center was a cloud of red. Angus was too preoccupied to see, but Rutger started to scream. Casey looked too and shouted, "Is that Ben's? Tell me that isn't Ben's blood." Angus looked up and saw it. "We have to help him," he yelled. "Angus, the only way we can help him is by getting out of here and getting someone else," I said. I knew it was a lie. Ben had already been under for too long, and no one would be able to get here in time. Angus called my bluff. "No, swim down there and get him. We can't just leave him." JJ started to sob. "Angus, listen to me. He's dead. Grab onto JJ so that I can at least get you out alive. I have to get you out. I'm your older brother. I'm supposed to protect you." Angus turned back to the ever-growing cloud of blood and then back to me. He wrapped his hand around JJ's, and again I pulled as hard as I could. Everyone groaned from the strain on their arms and shoulders, but slowly they started to rise from the mud. Then JJ's sob turned to a wail of fear. "JJ, calm down and hold on. We're nearly out of this mess," said Rutger. JJ's wail only increased before he was sucked down, nearly taking Rutger and Angus with him. "What the shit?" yelled Rutger. It was faster this time. Another ripple came in a different circle of motion, and blood clouded the water like an obscene Venn diagram. "JJ!" screamed Angus. "Casey, get out there. I'm taking your place in the chain," I said. "What? I'm not going out there to die," he replied. "Casey, that's my brother out there. If you don't go, I'll kill you myself." He saw the truth in my eyes and made no further protest. He stepped across the compromised ice until he was between Rutger and Angus. I slid down the bank and forcibly cracked my way through the thin barrier. I still had good footing as I grabbed Rutger. I tried my best to wrench him from the mud, but now he seemed cemented. "I know what happened. It's got me too," said Rutger. My grip slipped. His ankle was ripped out from under him, and he slid through Casey's legs. Casey tripped over Rooker's body and slammed hard into the sludge. Then Rooker was pulled under the mud. A streak of blood followed his trail and ended in the center of the pond. Casey was now sprawled out with his arms toward me and his legs almost to Angus. I grabbed his wrists. "Angus, grab Casey's legs. It's our only chance," I shrieked. "But what about—" "No buts! Do it! Now!" He obliged, and I yanked with every ounce of adrenaline that was pumping through my body. I was adamant on getting my brother out of there. Angus was ripped from the slime with the sound of releasing suction. I kept pulling and tried to walk back up the bank. Suddenly, a small tendril of mud wrapped around Casey's torso. It grew until it covered his entire chest in an envelope of brown. When finished, it pulled downward in overwhelming opposition of my own force. Casey started to fold in half. He yelped in pain and passed out. I struggled to pull him free even as his shoulders popped out of place and his elbows distended into noodles. I heard the crackle of his spine as he disappeared under the mud. "Angus, roll! Roll to shore!" I yelled. Angus tried to spin his body through the muck, but his hand hit a spot of the goo and seemed to melt into it. I dove to grab his other one. He screamed as his arm was bent backward by the mud thing. "Angus, keep fighting! Come on!" "I can't. It's got me. Tell Mom I love her," he said. The mud pulsed and ran over his forearm. I tried to pull again, and the arm came free. I was left holding Angus's hand, severed at the wrist. I fell backward into the steep embankment. He was dragged over the surface of the pond and then sank under. The water erupted into a geyser of blood and flesh. I grabbed at the grass and pulled myself out as the mud swelled and crashed over the bank toward me. I barely managed to escape the reaching tendrils of grime, with Angus's hand still clasped in mine. I ran off, got my bike, and rode home. My tale was met with hatred and suspicion as I displayed poor Angus's hand to my parents. The cops picked me up the next day. I was tried as an adult due to the heinousness of my alleged crime. My lawyer advised that I stay quiet about the true story, but I believed in justice. I told them everything, but the jury thought that it was a lie. I was sentenced to life in prison. "Dear God, you're the Mudbog Butcher," said Scott. "You're an urban legend. Kids would chant rhymes about you when I was just a young boy. Stick in the mud, stick in the ass. The Mudbog Butcher's got no class. Try to play, have any fun. The Mudbog Butcher will drown you in scum." "Were you listening? I didn't kill them. They were my friends," I yelled, rising to my feet. A group of prison guards approached. "What kind of monster kills a bunch of children? I saw the news. You obliterated them. There was barely anything for the police to find." I hopped over the table and punched his nose. Likeness to my brother or not, I couldn't handle being accused. Scott's visage was a bloody, mangled mess before the guards managed to pull me off. He didn't deserve to have Angus's face, so I rectified that. He would never look the same again. The guards took me to solitary. I was well familiar with the place and settled into the peace and quiet like a beast finding its natural habitat. And when I was sure that there was no one to hear me, I wept. This has been Stick in the Mud, written and recorded for audiostories.com by Curtiss Christensen. Thanks for listening.